Shalom, everyone. This is this video is going to be part one of an ongoing series on the divine hierarchy, which is an entire and gigantic and massive subject of HaQabbalah, which really is essentially the foundation of the entire Kabbalah. The entire foundation of HaQabbalah is essentially gaining a full knowledge of the quintessence of God, or I should really say the Godhead and everything that it encompasses and its entire essence, etc. And so essentially, this is an extraordinarily, ridiculously comprehensive, gigantic, enormous subject of HaKabbalah. And this is just going to be this video is going to just merely be part one of an ongoing series on this. And honestly, this series probably is not going to do any justice to just giving full explanations and really covering the entire scope of this really comprehensive, enormous divine subject. Nevertheless, I'm going to do my best to simplify it as much as possible and give as much of a high-level overview as possible as well. I, of course, expect you, the listeners, to take my teachings and take them further in your own studies on learning Hebrew and acquiring these principal Kabbalistic texts and meditating and praying and becoming initiated further into these esoteric divine subjects. Now, I begin by stating that we can best think about the divine hierarchy, or the entire Godhead, really, as a very complex, highly organized pyramid. Okay? Really, the way I like to think about it, though, is an extremely highly complex divine brain. When you reach the highest levels of holy initiation, as I have, you'll begin to understand and see and perceive the entire divine hierarchy as really as one huge complex divine brain with numerous pathways and entities, neurons, sections, etc. If you think if you use the brain as a symbol or an allegory, right? We can think of all of the pathways as divine pathways. We can think of all of the neurons as entities, and different sections representing different divine orders, right? You get the gist of it. This is really, I think, the best way to think of really how the divine hierarchy operates, essentially. And in terms of its hierarchical order, we can sort of affix it to a pyramid-like structure. Now, I have to begin in just in briefly introducing the subject that our principal Kabbalistic text that lays much of the groundwork and foundation for this, comprehensive, enormous divine subject is really Sefer HaZohar. And I would say approximately 70% of Sefer HaZohar is just strictly all about explaining and elucidating and revealing the entire divine hierarchy. Okay. Now, as a little anecdote or introduction, to this, I will state, and I don't really like stating much about myself, but I'm a 26-year-old Sephardic, Mekabel, or Jewish Kabbalist, and highly initiated Kabbalists like myself. Only a few of us come every generation. As an example, and I ask that you please don't confuse my declarations of the facts with hubris, but I'm sort of on the same level as individual Kabbalists like Moshe Cordovero and Ramchal. These are Kabbalists who were very perspicacious and sagacious individuals who already in their early 20s were already becoming fully initiated into the holy mysteries. And of course, they were not recognized in their own generation. In other words, in the generation of Moshe Cordovero, no one knew who he was. He was totally unrecognized as a very highly initiated Kabbalist. The same thing with Ramchal. Ramchal was rejected and despised by many Jews in his generation, and no one would have ever thought that he was as highly initiated as he was in his generation. It's only centuries after the fact that everyone realizes how great and how highly initiated these Kabbalists are. The same thing goes with Pico della Mirandola, who was a highly initiated Christian Kabbalist. Highly fully initiated already in his early 20s, and these individual Kabbalists are already writing giant, enormous magnus opuses in their mid-20s. I'm, of course, no exception to this rule. I'm in my mid-20s, and highly fully initiated Kabbalist. I've already written one magnus opus, and of course I'm unrecognized. I'm considered a heretic by most Jews and Christians, and it's probably not only going to be after the fact that everyone will realize, wow, this was a giant Mechabel, who attempted to share and reveal so much divine light into the world. But of course, you can see this as evidence through some of my highly advanced Kabbalistic videos, which only have on average like 10 views. Nevertheless, for somebody like at my level, it took me, about 5 years just to read the entire, Zohar. So I'm saying all of this, not to be proud or to brag or anything like that. Far be from it. Really, it's just to explain that somebody on my level, it took 5 years, okay, of just focusing. These 5 years were entirely spent on reading, 10 volumes of the Zohar, in the Hebrew, meditating on them and making sure I understand every aspect of what I'm reading, and meditating on them, and becoming initiated into the holy knowledge and wisdom presented in the text. So I, as myself, who devoted all of my time for 5 years in studying and mastering this book, it's to give you a comparison as to how long it might take somebody who's not at my level, more of a lay person. It's going to take them a much, much longer time, especially if they don't know Hebrew or Aramaic. They don't have a solid foundation in the exoteric Jewish texts like Talmudim and the Midrashim, okay, etc. And also if they don't even have, if they can't even dedicate all of their time to fully mastering the text to begin with. So I say all of this to give you some sort of conception as to how long it's going to take an average individual who wants to attempt to be initiated in mastering and initiating and being initiated, into this holy esoteric wisdom. Okay, so again, the point here in me saying all of this is that full complete initiation into this momentous foundation of the holy mysteries takes years. Okay, and learning never stops. Even now I'm continuing to learn more and more about the divine hierarchy and the Godhead, because really it's the magnitude of the subject is really infinite in nature, because the Godhead is really infinite in essence. Okay, so again, the point is that to be initiated at the highest levels takes many, many years, and the energy and time spent on reaching certain levels of high initiation all depend on your spiritual root and source. Okay, because not every soul, not every spirit is equal. Okay, so now we're going to move on to briefly covering the pinnacle of this pyramid, which really is Eyn Sof. So at the top of the pyramid is Eyn Sof, which is Hebrew for the infinite one, and he is symbolized occultly, whether it's by Luciferians or holy saints like myself, by the all-seeing eye. Of course, Luciferians, much of their theology has been stolen and taken from us, the holy saints, and the true Illuminati, the true illuminated ones, because Lucifer doesn't really deliver any holy knowledge or wisdom to them. He's all about deception. And certain Luciferians at the highest orders know this, which is why they come to us and read our books and steal our knowledge. They're nothing more than copycats. But then again, that's what Lucifer is. Lucifer is nothing more than a copycat of the divine order. Now, the late Luciferians ignorantly equate the all-seeing eye with Lucifer, but the few and very elite Luciferians, which are few in number, truly know that it is Eyn Sof. These are the Luciferians that have been initiated into the holy mysteries. Okay, these are the ones that actually have done their research and homework and know what the all-seeing eye truly represents, which is that it is Eyn Sof. Even though they're not really true, they can't be really called true worshippers of Eyn Sof, at least not from our vantage point. Now, all of the ancient mystery schools worship Eyn Sof. Okay, these include but are not limited to the ancient Zoroastrians, the Druids, the Neoplatonists, the Brahmins, the Persian and Babylonian Magi, and the ancient Israelites. Most of the ancient theosophies and mystery religions and theosophies are all images of one archetypal philosophy, which is why we see a syncretic thread running through all of these ancient theosophies. I've explained this in another video, which is my video, which I think is my video that is part 1 on metempsychosis. I go a little bit more into detail on explaining this. Nevertheless, Eyn Sof is the one and only God to all holy initiates and adepts. Those who have begun their holy secret initiation and can be truly called holy initiates and adepts, we all know who the true one and only God is. It's Eyn Sof. Every single time we say that there is only one God, reference is to Eyn Sof. Unfortunately, the multitude and the laity have no understanding of this whatsoever. When they say that they worship one and only one God and that they are monotheists, they don't really understand what they're saying. They don't really truly understand what's going on because they're uninitiated. Okay? So again, to the multitude, to the laity, Eyn Sof is unknown. They have no idea who Eyn Sof is. They have no conception of him. They have no conception of the one and only true God. So this is very critical to understand. And this is the great secret and mystery behind a very ancient divine oracle recorded in Sefer Yeshayahu in chapter 45, verse 15, where it states, "Verily you are a El who conceals himself." Here, El is an occult reference to Eyn Sof, who conceals himself. Eyn Sof has concealed himself from everyone except us, the true holy initiates and adepts, the true holy Illuminati. We're the only ones that know who the one and true God is, that it's really Eyn Sof. But again, we have to understand, he conceals himself. He's concealed. So now we move on to the next big section in the divine hierarchy, which is the Hasferoth, or the Godhead. Now, I already have a series on Hasferoth. I have a 3-part, I believe it's a 4-part or so series on Hasferoth, which goes into all of the, it goes through all of the proofs in the scriptures, showing and revealing Hasferoth in the scriptures, all of the many of the relevant Kabbalistic citations in our principal treatises. The point is, I have a series that goes into a much fuller, in-depth explanation with scriptural proofs of Hasferoth and the Godhead. You can go watch that series if you want to know more about this. This video is not intended to go into explicit detail on giving full explanation of Hasferoth, the Godhead, and what they are. Nevertheless, assuming you have a basic foundation and understanding of Hasferoth, then you know that Elohim is plural, which of course is a reference to Hasferoth, or the Godhead. And this is the mystery, the great Kabbalistic mystery of the permutation of the word Elohim, because when it's permuted, in Hebrew it becomes Haim Yod El. Now we know that the letter Yod has a gematria of 10. So this phrase then means they the 10 are El. So Elohim cryptically also signifies they the 10 are El, because when it's permuted, this is one of the meanings of the word. Another permutation of the word is mi ele, which is Hebrew for who are these. So another meaning of the word Elohim is really a divine question, which is who are these, in reference back to the original word Elohim, meaning who are these Elohim? Who are these gods? Well, the answer is found in another permutation of the word, which is me ele yod, which is Hebrew for from these are the 10. And again, this phrase, being polysemous, can also signify she is full of the 10, because ma'aleh yod means she is full of the 10. It all depends on the nikudim, or the vowel points that are below the word, that are below that first word. So that phrase there can either mean from these are the 10, or she is full of the 10. She, of course, would be a reference to Shekhinah, who is full and contains all 10 emanations. Okay? So essentially, Hasferot are the 10 ans or emanations of Eyn Sof. And essentially, they are the intermediary between Eyn Sof and the lower universes, of which we inhabit one of. And so, we holy initiates and adepts, we worship Eyn Sof through the Sferoth, because we cannot directly worship Eyn Sof because he is so far removed from our perceptions, from our reality, from our knowledge and wisdom, etc. We can't even speak about him. We can't say anything about him. Okay? So this is where the Sferoth come into play. We, holy initiates and adepts, we worship Eyn Sof through the Sferoth. So by worshiping HaSferoth, we worship Eyn Sof. Okay? And so essentially, they are the gods of Israel. Again, we need to understand that most ignorant theologians and Christians, and to a large extent Jews, refer to the God in the Bible as the God of Israel, the God being in the singular. But in the original Hebrew, that phrase is always correctly the gods of Israel. The Hebrew of that phrase in Hebrew is Elohei Yisrael, which is Hebrew for the gods of Israel. Elohei, which I have written here below on the slide, is the plural construct of the word Elohim, or God, or the gods. It's a plural word. It's a plural construct. So to translate that Hebrew expression or phrase as the God of Israel is an incorrect translation, just as it is incorrect to translate Elohim as God. Elohim strictly and correctly in ancient Hebrew means gods. It's a plural. Okay? There's no getting around that whatsoever. If you want to deceive yourself and say that Elohim means God or is singular, then be my guest. Deceive yourself by all means. But I want to emphasize that the word Elohim is plural. And anytime it is translated in the singular, that represents an incorrect, deceptive, and false translation. Likewise, the phrase or expression, the gods of Israel, is plural. And any translation that translates that phrase as God of Israel is an incorrect and false and deceptive translation. Okay? The singularity of the Godhead is given through the singular conjugation of that of the subject, of the plural subject. In other words, anytime the plural subject Elohim or Elohei Yisrael is affixed to a verb, that verb is conjugated in the singular. Even though it's an incorrect conjugation, it's a correct conjugation given by the ancient scribes to allude to a mystical paradox, which is the equation of the plurality and the singularity within the Godhead. Okay, and I have highlighted the last letter of that word Elohei in the slide. I've enlarged the yod, which is the last letter of the word Elohei, because that yod is what makes the word, Elohim plural. And that yod has a gematria of 10. I've highlighted it because that letter and what it represents, the numerical value it represents, which is 10, all ties in back mystically to the Sferoth, or the 10 emanations. The emphasis is on the number 10, the holy decad. And this is why it is momentous to properly understand Hebrew and properly translate these Hebrew words and phrases or expressions. Now we move on to the last part of the divine hierarchy, which is what I like to call the twins. These are the two atoms vis-a-vis Lucifer and Mashiach, also known as Metatron and Sandalphon. Metatron being Yeshua HaMashiach and Sandalphon being Lucifer, which is the mystery of Esau and Yaakov and the mystery of Cain and Habel. Now, I already have a series on Adam Kadmon, which goes into much more detail explaining the binary nature, really the Kabbalistic and esoteric binary nature of Adam and these twins, these divine supernal twins. I have a series on this, so if you haven't seen that series, please go watch that series so you can get a much more full understanding of who these divine twins are. But this is at these twins are the two firstborn sons of the Sphirot, or the Godhead. So we have at the top Eyn Sof. He emanates 10 emanations, and then these 10 emanations emanate two sub-emanations, which are these twins. So I then proceed here to give a Torah parable. So this is a parable in the Torah that I give. It's a nice parable that explains the divine hierarchy, or at least gives a high-level overview of the divine hierarchy. So this is one of my favorite parables in the Torah. It's a very esoteric parable designed to give the holy reader a very, very, very high-level overview of the divine hierarchy through the family, the divine archetypal family of Israel. Okay? Again, we need to understand that Israel is binary vis-a-vis Israel and Yaakov. Israel represents the Father and the Godhead, and Israel and Leah have 6 sons and 1 daughter. Leah then represents the Mother and the Godhead, and the 6 sons represent the mystery of the one Son in the Godhead. And Dinah, who is the daughter, represents Shekhinah, or the daughter in the Godhead. Okay, and Yaakov and Rachel represent the union of the son and the daughter in the Godhead. And so really we need to Kabbalistically and mystically understand that Rachel is equal to Dinah in the mystery of Shekhinah. And Yaakov and Rachel have 2 sons. So these 2 sons then represent the twins, which are Meshach and Lucifer. Okay, so when we do the addition, right, we have the 6 sons plus the daughter gives us the lower 7 emanations. And then you have the mother and the father, which is plus 2, gives us 9 emanations. Through Imkolel, which is a Kabbalistic occult mathematical principle, we can equate the number 9 with the number 10. So that gives us our 9 or 10 emanations. And then they emanate these 2 lower sons or sub-emanations, which are the twins, which are Meshach and Lucifer, which are the mystery of Yosef and Binyamin. Again, this is a gross oversimplification of the divine hierarchy. I say it's a gross oversimplification because there's been books that have been written just on this part of the divine Godhead, and really it would take hundreds of pages and numerous hours upon hours and days of lectures to fully explain and give a full comprehensive understanding of what's really going on here, and to really break this down with the scriptural proofs going into the Hebrew, etc. Okay, so truly and really, this is a really super gross oversimplification of the matter here. But again, it's a good introduction and high-level overview in attempting to understand the divine hierarchy here. So here I have a diagram. Now I'm personally, as an Orthodox Jew, I'm really bad at art. But, the Torah forbids art, as I'm sure many of you should know. And so since the Torah forbids art in many aspects, I just really suck at art. So excuse my very poor artistic ability in diagrams in these videos. But nevertheless, here I have a diagram representing the high-level overview that I have covered so far. At the top, we have the all-seeing eye, which is Eyn Sof. Then we have below that the 10 emanations, or the Godhead, and then, or the essence or the core of the Godhead, really, because we can really we can say that this entire diagram is the Godhead, essentially. But Kabbalistically, when we refer to the Godhead, we are either referring to the entire structure, which would be this diagram, or to just the actual 10 Sphirot. Usually, more often than not, when we use the word Godhead, more often than not, it's really a reference to the 10 Sphirot. Okay. So after Eyn Sof, we have the 10 emanations, and then from the 10 emanations, really through the union of the son and the daughter, in the Sphirot, we get the first 2 born sons, which are Mashiach and Lucifer. Okay. Now, again, I have to emphasize, I cannot emphasize this enough. This diagram here, what has been explained so far, is a really ridiculously nasty, gross oversimplification. Again, this is a really extraordinarily high level overview. Okay, you know, as best as I can explain, if we focus on Eyn Sof, Eyn Sof is an infinity of infinities. We can't even talk about Eyn Sof to begin with. Okay, if we then proceed one level below Eyn Sof, which is the 10 Sefirot, we need to understand that we can think of each sphera as a level, and really each level is infinite in nature, meaning each level breaks off into infinite levels with numerous pathways and levels and orders and sections, etc. And it's like that for every one of those 10 levels. Okay, so really we can think of the 10 Sefirot as an infinity of infinities. Again, we need to understand that the Sefirot really is really an inferior image of Eyn Sof, which is why there is an infinite aspect to HaSefirot. Okay, so understand this. I'm telling you about 10 emanations, but these 10 emanations are infinite in scope. Each sphera is infinite in scope. And we can spend many hours and hundreds and thousands of pages of books, etc., explaining each sphera, breaking it down into its levels, components, and sections, and pathways, etc. The same thing applies to Mashiach and to Lucifer. So now I'm hoping you can begin to understand why this is going to be an ongoing series, because part one here is a ridiculously nasty, gross oversimplification, and a very high level overview. I've really broken down the entire Godhead into 3 parts, but each of these parts breaks down into infinite levels. And I'm not obviously I don't have the time to create a series, to cover all infinite levels of, all of these levels in this diagram. I just don't. But again, I'm saying all of this because it's extremely momentous that you understand that, even though I'm attempting to break down the Godhead into components here to better understand it, in reality, it's infinite in scope. Each section, each compartment of the Godhead is infinite in scope. And I will go into this will be further understood as this series progresses. This concept will be further understood. So again, I end this video by going back to the mystery of the divine oracle that I presented initially, which is found in Sefer Yeshayahu in chapter 45, verse 15, which states, "Verily, you are a El who conceals himself, Elohei Yisrael, the gods of Israel, the Moshiach," which is Hebrew for the Savior. Now, it's no coincidence. It's for no reason that I decided to present the divine hierarchy by breaking it down into 3 components or sections, because this ancient divine oracle breaks the divine hierarchy into 3 sections. Right. The first part is the El who conceals himself, which is an occult reference to Eyn Sof. The second part is Elohei Yisrael, which is an occult reference to the Sefirot. And then the third part is Moshiach, which is Mashiach. By the way, they sound very similar. Moshiach, Mashiach, they sound very similar, which is a reference, obviously, to Mashiach. Okay, so here we are given a trilateral aspect of the Godhead, right? We have to understand that when we holy adepts and initiates, when we use the word Trinity, the word Trinity has many levels to it, right? And on one level, the Trinity can be a reference to this trilateral, representation of the Godhead that I have presented here as an introduction. Just as this ancient holy oracle presents this very esoteric, trilateral understanding or presentation of the Godhead. So, with that said, I conclude this most holy divine presentation. Shalom, Amen.